Finance Committee approves Zhengguano landfill expansion works. A bid to appeal against an injunction order in relation to part of the Admiralty protest site rejected. And the Philippines bracing for the onslaught of a strong typhoon.
Good evening. The Legislative Council's Finance Committee today approved a funding proposal for the Zhengguano landfill expansion plan. Pan-Democratic legislators attempted to stall voting on the proposal by moving over 100 motions, all of which were rejected.
I declare the motion
The estimated cost of the project now stands at $2.1 billion. Legislators began scrutinizing the funding request back in July, but voting was delayed due to filibustering. According to the Environment Bureau, the delay added around $100 million more to the project's price tag. Now that funding was approved, expansion works are expected to begin late next year. The additional landfill space will come into service in 2017.
The filibustering process is delaying these essential infrastructure projects that are necessity for Hong Kong. While we have the comprehensive blueprint, including waste reduction, food-wise, supporting clean recycling, but these infrastructures are a must for Hong Kong's hygienic operation and also for the daily necessity. The delaying of these infrastructure projects would, on one hand, increase its costs. At the same time, that it would delay the waste-to-energy capacity in Hong Kong. That would return would increase the burden on our landfills. So we hope that we'd get the support by the councillors as soon as possible so that we can carry out the tendering process soon so that we can minimize the cost and also to meet the need of Hong Kong.
The High Court has rejected an application for leave to appeal against an injunction order aimed at clearing out a section of the Admiralty protest site. The clearance is not expected to take place until next Wednesday at the earliest, as the plaintiff will be meeting with the police and bailiffs on Tuesday to discuss how best to go ahead with the operation. The injunction is sought by a bus company that runs services between Wan Chai and the mainland. High Court Judge Thomas Au said today he sees no reasonable prospect of success in the applicant's intended grounds of appeal. The judge said it's a matter of common sense that those who make a living from providing transportation would suffer a loss because of road blockages. The interim injunction is expected to get its court seal by Monday, and the bus company's legal representative said after that they will arrange to post the court order in newspapers.
Well, obviously, Admiralty being the main center of the occupation movement, any kind of operation to try to clear it would obviously arouse certain sense of opposition or fight from the people involved. So one would have thought in terms of numbers, in terms of the structures involved, in terms of the equipment that might be necessary for us to bring there, in terms of the possible conflicts, I think we all have to be very serious about and work out very careful arrangement before we go ahead.
As the meeting with the bailiffs and police is next Tuesday, Zhe said the execution of the injunction order will not take place before Wednesday. Some protesters disagreed with the need for the injunction, but said they would remove their belongings from the area before the clearance goes ahead.
If the police, also the bailiff, is strictly follow the injunction order which the area is covering, I think people here or us will not trying to stop the bailiffs or trying to stop the police.
An Occupy marshal said he hopes the operation will stay peaceful.
I try to, protect the people and the student from the violence, and we don't want any violence in this area. We just want to make sure everybody's okay. If the people, most people and the student want to, get away, this area, we will follow, I think.
The pressure is on for the government to resume dialogue with student leaders as pan-democrats and 3 pro-establishment lawmakers vow to push for a meeting between the two sides. As for the possible clearance of the Admiralty protest site next week, the police watchdog says it might send representatives to observe the process. Stephanie Cho reports.
Liberal Party lawmakers Felix Chung and James Tian paid a visit to 5 students on hunger strike in Admiralty. James Tian said he will give a call to Chief Secretary for Administration Carrie Lam to relay the students' request to meet with government officials. During a banquet next Tuesday, his party will also try to talk to Chief Executive Lun Chen-ying into establishing a conversation with the students. Tian said he thinks the CE, as Hong Kong's leader, should speak with any group asking for dialogue. Meanwhile, another pro-establishment legislator, Paul Tse, who found the hunger strike heartbreaking, vowed to help push for dialogue between authorities and student leaders.
Well, the students have asked for the involvement of the CE himself, so we will start with that. And failing which, obviously, we'll approach the CE as well, the CS as well, to make sure that somebody from high up will be able to start a dialogue with the students again.
Democratic Party Chairwoman Emily Lau said pan-democratic legislators have also agreed to write Lun Chen-ying on meeting with students. Later in the afternoon, a group of higher education academics rallied against alleged police brutality towards occupiers and called for the resumption of dialogue between the government and students.
Their request is very humble, that it was time the chief executive came out and have dialogue with the students.
On a visit to Huizhou in Guangdong province today, Lun Chen-ying said he's happy to discuss issues related to universal suffrage, provided that they are discussed within the context of the Basic Law and the National People's Congress Standing Committee framework. Joshua Wong, one of the students now on hunger strike, said it's useless to ask Lun Chen-ying whether Beijing would withdraw the political reform framework it set for the SAR in late August. Rather, he said, the focus of the dialogue will be on rebooting the political reform process.
It do not reject or do not violate the principle of the Basic Law and the decision made on 31 of August.
Meanwhile, in response to reports on the possible clearance of the Admiralty protest site next Wednesday, members of the public have sent 480 invitations to the Independent Police Complaints Council, or IPCC, asking them to observe the clearance operation. The Council's Secretary General said the IPCC is seriously considering the suggestion. Stephanie Choi, TVB News.
The pressure and a magistrate today ordered American photojournalist Paula Bronstein to be bound over for 2 years for suspected criminal damage during a confrontation between protesters and the police in Mong Kok. The photojournalist was arrested on October 17th after she climbed onto the bonnet of a private vehicle during a protest at the junction of Sion Choi Street South and Argyle Street. She allegedly left a 6-inch scratch mark and a large number of shoe prints on the car. The owner, who was in the vehicle at the time, called the police. Bronstein appeared at Kwun Tong Magistracy this morning, and the court agreed to the prosecution's suggestion to bind her over with a $2,000 conditional penalty if she breaches the order in the next 2 years. The magistrate said the defendant has a right to report on the news to the world, but cannot go around damaging personal property.
Turning overseas now, a ferocious and dangerously erratic typhoon is blowing closer to the Philippines tonight, with one forecast predicting it could graze the capital, Manila. Typhoon Hagupit, which means smash, is expected to blast in from the Pacific Ocean into the central Philippines by late Saturday. The storm has peak gusts of 250 kilometers per hour. Hagupit could lash part of the area that was devastated by last year's Typhoon Haiyan, which killed more than 7,300 people. The good news is that the typhoon is weakening as it churns closer to the coast. The controversy over the policing of black communities in the United States took a turn for the worse in the state of Arizona, where a police officer shot to death an unarmed black man on Tuesday. Phoenix police say 34-year-old Romaine Brisbane was sitting in a car outside a convenience store on Tuesday night when witnesses claimed he was selling drugs. A 7-year-old police veteran told him to raise his hands, but he ran away instead. The officer claims as the two struggled, he thought he felt a gun in the suspect's pocket, so he shot him. It turns out there was no gun on the victim. Police later found suspected drugs and a semi-automatic handgun in the suspect's car. A grand jury decision now awaits the fate of this officer. Well, staying in the United States, and a swarm of people demonstrated across the U.S. for a second night to express outrage over a grand jury's decision to clear a white police officer from the chokehold death of a black teenager in New York. But local authorities stand by the accused officer and claim the victim did not die of choking. Sonia Artero reports.
Video of what people see as proof that New York police officer Daniel Pantaleo choked Eric Garner to death triggered even more protests across New York last night. The mayor tried calming protesters by saying the NYPD is not racist.
People need to know that black lives and brown lives matter as much as white lives.
Tensions rose as crowds weaved through cars on the Manhattan Bridge, bringing traffic to a standstill. Police made a number of arrests when protesters refused to move onto sidewalks. A New York Police Department representative wants critics who accuse cops of being racist to know, despite appearances, the victim did not die of a chokehold.
Unfortunately, he died for a number of reasons. And as the grand jury saw and the medical examiner said, it was not a chokehold that killed that person.
In fact, police say Garner was a serial troublemaker who had been arrested 30 times. The day he died, he was out on bail after being charged with illegally selling cigarettes and possession of marijuana.
But unfortunately, Mr. Gardner made a choice that day to resist arrest.
In the nation's capital, Reverend Jesse Jackson criticized the grand jury's decision in this and the police shooting of an unarmed black teenager in Ferguson, Missouri.
The wrongful inaction by a New York grand jury, along with Bob McCullough, manipulated and perverted St. Louis County grand jury, clearly reveals an American judicial system in crisis.
So, D.C. protesters made their action count by belting out the last 3 words Eric Garner uttered.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Sonia Artero, TVB News.
And still ahead in the news tonight. New thresholds for URA demand-led redevelopment projects. A new Ferris wheel goes into business in Central. And a survival story in Poland.